So moving ahead, let's talk about section 2.2.3, which is outline the utility of distributed file system. So we have discussed about the distributed file system in the last slide, but then this is more of the benefits in detail about the distributed file system. So you can certainly see, since there is a dedicated slide for distributed file system, there can be a question in exam about what are those benefits. So let's look into this, and it's a relatively more simple question because we know about the features of distributed file systems, and these features are equivalent to the benefits of your distributed file system. So first, obviously the distributed file systems have a low cost of storage, and it provides the flexibility to add more servers. So you can always store data in multiple servers. They can be accessed over the network, and the overall cost of storage is relatively low. So this basically distributed file system provides you the overall flexibility in terms of storing the large or big amount of data. So DFS, as we call it, is called distributed file system. Basically, is a great enabler for storing big data. The next benefit is it has the ability to store data that do not have the explicit use in its original format. So suppose if you have to store data in flat files, definitely you can think of putting the distributed file system for the purpose of storing of that data. Also, you can have the capacity to process that kind of chunk of data across multiple servers. So you can use multiple servers, CPUs for processing the data simultaneously by splitting the task across the network. So as we see, the most important element in this is the data is stored across the servers in multiple locations. There is a dependency on network, which is a primary important thing, but then the benefits which is offers is overall low cost, the kind of flexibility, and the kind of scalability, which you can definitely see it by having a relatively less of risk involved in it, right? So in today's digital ecosystem, if you see, the overall performance and scalability definitely plays an important role, and in this case, your distributed file system can definitely be one of those enablers by having these features of having the shared computing resources, by having the feature of load which can be shared across the multiple servers across the nodes in the network. So these are the few features which basically enables us to be the overall benefits when you refer to the distributed file system as a use case. Moving ahead, so now let's try to look at the advantages of cloud as part of section 2.2.4. So this section basically describes the kind of advantages of using the cloud solution. So you can always think of at least a question from this section as well, because cloud is anyhow important a topic whenever you are discussing any of the elements of of data analytics as well. So cloud can be one of those places where you can think of storing your data as well. So there can be at least a question in exam pertaining to the same. So as we say, cloud computing is now becoming the most popular choice among all the digital enterprises. Previously, organizations were using traditional ways of storing the data on premise. They were having their own set of your hardwares or software environment. But then now organizations are more adapting towards the cloud computing as a ways of providing the services. So you basically access all the data to the likes of internet by having those data stored on the cloud ecosystem. So you have the large vendors, the likes of AWS, you have the vendors, the likes of Azure or Google Cloud Platform, GCP, which basically store those data in their data centers, and then you can access that data through the likes of internet, and you basically get a benefit of pay as you use that information or data or that kind of hardware or the kind of software which is being used across. So that's a fundamental advantage of using the cloud platform. Cloud computing infrastructure, as we see, is basically meant by virtualizing servers and your databases. So it's more flexible. It's easy to extend those those servers or your virtual machines or virtual systems, which is a limitation in your physical hardware. So in your physical hardware, in your traditional on-premise data centers, there is definitely a limitation to extend your physical hardware because there are fixed limit of racks and stacks which you can do. So that's not the case. That's not so that is not a challenge in the case of cloud computing. So you can definitely visualize your servers, your databases, and then you can extend and have the required amount of resources for carrying out your data analytics projects. Again, the advantage of using the cloud computing is basically it have relatively low cost of operation, right? So I can say this can be an exam question. Cloud offers relatively low cost of operation, but then there's no rule of thumb that every time when we move on to cloud, the cost of operation will be less. So we need to take a informed decision when we are trying to move on to the cloud, whether there would be a cost optimization when you are moving on to cloud, or there can be a long-term increase in cost because of the large volume of data. So the advantage of cost operation or cost optimization needs to be looked upon case on case basis, what kind of contracts you have with the cloud service provider, and what is the overall volume of data you are having. So if the volume of data is relatively small or less, and if you basically have a greater variance in terms of your scale, then definitely you can think of using cloud because it provides you the overall flexibility of upscaling and downscaling your resources based on your needs. Suppose if you're an e-commerce company who basically have thousands of customers log into your website on a regular basis, but then if at some specific particular days you want few millions or billions of people to log in that case your traditional hardware or on-premise hardware might not be sufficient. So you can think of using cloud in that case. But then if you see that the overall transaction done are relatively less or small, definitely you can think of either having a small space in your traditional data centers as well. So it all depends on the kind of business you are and what are the kind of long-term transactions of value which you carry out. So by using your cloud infrastructure, organization definitely will or can free up their time to focus more on your core analytics functions, or they can focus more on the core business rather than managing the mundane task of your hardware or software infrastructure. So cloud basically provides you that kind of flexibility wherein your resources can be freed up and they can be reskilled for the better activities and tasks. The cloud computing, as we call, has now become more popular choice among all the digital enterprises, and organizations do not need to have the large upfront investment, capital investment done, right? So they can always believe on cloud, focus on pay-as-you-go model, and hence it basically reduce their overall operational cost and overall cost pertaining to the staffing as well. So they can access any variety of computational resource, whether that can be of RDBMS, that can be kind of key value storage, that can be the kind of distributed file system. So all these storage can be accessed through the likes of cloud computing. Your data migration tool, your data streaming solutions, your virtualization tools, and even your data analytics can be taken as a service when you're trying to use cloud platform for your scalability. So this basically helps you to reduce the overall programming efforts drastically, and this also help you to reduce the overall provisioning skill, right? So if you are having a long infrastructure or queue where there are lots of requests coming across and there is a limited number of people, then obviously they will not be able to provision all the requests. So cloud can be a best way because in cloud you don't need to do lots of provisioning from the perspective of infrastructure. Those things can handle at a click of button, right? So hence cloud can be relatively an easier solution as compared to the traditional data centers.